Today, we are going to discuss right view, samma ditthi in Theravada Buddhism. Now, Buddhism is the teaching of Lord Gautama Buddha, who lived and taught in India in the 6th and 5th century before Christ. Now, while meditating under a tree in a place called Bodh Gaya in India, the Buddha attained enlightenment as a samma sambuddha through the realization of the Four Noble Truths with no assistance from any teacher. Now, Buddha was aged 35 when he gained enlightenment as a samma sambuddha. Having gained enlightenment as a samma sambuddha, the Buddha decided to teach the Buddhist doctrine and the path of liberation from suffering that the Buddha discovered during enlightenment to others so that they could also cultivate the same path of liberation and liberate themselves from suffering. So at the deer park in a place called Varanasi in India, the Buddha delivered his first sermon called Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, meaning turning of the wheel of truth, to 5 ascetic companions who had supported the Buddha during the 6 years of his struggle to gain enlightenment. And in that first discourse, Buddha described the Four Noble Truths that he realized during the process of enlightenment. And the Four Noble Truths are the truth of universal suffering, dukkha satcha, truth of the origin of suffering, samudaya satcha, truth of the cessation of suffering, nirodha satcha, and truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering, magga satcha. Now, the first noble truth is that there is unavoidable, inevitable, universal suffering, both physical suffering and mental suffering. The second noble truth is the cause, the origin of suffering, and that is craving, tanha. And the Buddha described 3 types of craving. Craving for sensual pleasures, kama tanha. Craving for becoming, bhava tanha. And craving for non-becoming, vibhava tanha. The third noble truth is that the suffering can be completely eradicated. And that is the state of Nibbana. And suffering is eradicated by totally abandoning and eradicating craving in all forms. The fourth noble truth is the path leading to the end of suffering. And the Buddha described that as the Noble Eightfold Path. The Noble Eightfold Path provides practical steps that anyone can cultivate in order to gain enlightenment and liberate from suffering. There are 8 factors in the Noble Eightfold Path. Right view, samma ditthi. Right intention, samma sankappa. Right speech, samma vacha. Right action, samma kammanta. Right livelihood, samma ajiva. Right effort, samma vayama. Right mindfulness, samma sati. And right concentration, samma samadhi. Now, right view is also known as right understanding, right vision, and right perspective. Now, right view has been placed as the first factor of the Noble Eightfold Path for two particular reasons. Firstly, a certain level of correct understanding is needed to enter the Noble Eightfold Path. And then it has to be continually present in order to facilitate the development of the other 7 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path and to progress on the path. And the Buddha has described 2 types of right way. Mundane right view, Lokiya Samaditthi, and supra-mundane right view, Lokuttara Samaditthi. Now, in a discourse called Mahachattārisaka Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya, that's a collection of the Buddha's middle-length discourses. The Buddha said that mundane right view is associated with fermentations or influxes, that is a group of mental defilements. And it is also associated with desire to gain merit through meritorious actions and to expect a favorable rebirth, while supramundane right view is noble with no fermentations and it is transcendent and is a path factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. Now, mundane right view applies to the mundane world, and that is to remain in the cycle of birth and death. And this mundane right view is also known as kammasakata sammaditthi. And that is to have a correct understanding of how karma works. Now, according to Buddha's teaching, karma is any intentional, volitional, physical, verbal, or mental actions. And there are unwholesome actions and wholesome actions. Now, unwholesome intentional actions are based on the 3 unwholesome roots of greed, lobha, hatred, dosa, and delusion, moha. And the unwholesome actions produce bad results in this life and in future lives. Wholesome actions are based on the 3 wholesome roots of non-greed, alobha, non-hatred, adosa, and non-delusion, amoha. And wholesome actions will produce good results in this life as well as in future lives. And Buddha has said that mundane right view is present in relation to 10 worldly matters. That is, if one believes that there is merit in almsgiving, there is merit in large and small offerings, There is belief that good and bad deeds lead to good and bad results. There is merit in what is done to one's mother and father. There are beings who are instantaneously born, and there is this human world, and there are other worlds, and there are ascetics who can attain super knowledges. Now, supra-mundane right view is the correct understanding of the Four Noble Truths. That is, there is universal suffering, the cause of suffering is craving, the cessation of suffering can be attained by eradicating craving, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering is Noble Eightfold Path. And this correct understanding takes place in two ways. Firstly, at the beginning of the Noble Eightfold Path, there is a conceptual understanding of the Four Noble Truths through learning and through reflection. Then at the end of the Noble Eightfold Path, there is the proper understanding of the Four Noble Truths, and that is by penetrative and experiential realization through meditation. In a discourse called Vibhanga Sutta of the Samyutta Nikaya, that is a collection of the Buddha's connected discourses, addressing a group of monks, Buddha described what right view is. First, Buddha asks, and what, monks, is right view? Knowledge with regard to suffering, knowledge with regard to the origination of suffering, knowledge with regard to the cessation of suffering, and knowledge with regard to the way of practice leading to the cessation of suffering. Buddha said, this, monks, is called right view. And in another discourse called Mahavedalla Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya, Arahant Sariputta, who was one of the two chief disciples of the Buddha, described two conditions that are necessary for arising of right view. Firstly, one has to learn the Buddha's teaching by listening from another person, Parato Gosa. And once one has listened and learned the Buddha's teaching, then one needs to look at it through wise reflection or wise attention, yoniso manasikara. So the two factors that are required for the development of samma ditthi is parato gosa, listening to the teaching from someone else, and then applying wise attention to the teaching. Now, the same discourse describes 5 ways that can help to develop right view. And that is, one should have a virtuous, moral, ethical life. One should continue to listen and learn the Buddha's teaching. One should engage in discussing what one has learned. And one should practice concentration meditation to develop concentration and tranquility of the mind. And then one should engage in insight meditation in order to develop insight into true reality of all mental and physical phenomena. Now, mundane right view, one can develop whether there is a Buddha or Buddha's teaching in the world or not. But supramundane right view, that is understanding of the Four Noble Truths, can only be developed when there is a Buddha or Buddha's teaching available. Now, mundane right view helps one to engage in wholesome, meritorious actions that can lead to good benefits in this life and future lives. While supramundane right view helps one to cultivate the noble eightfold path, that is the Buddhist path of liberation, and to gain liberation from suffering and the cycle of birth and death, samsara. Thank you very much.